The rain in Seattle does not fall. It hangs in the air like a cold curtain that never opens. I was standing in it at 71 years old, fresh from dialysis, watching strangers carry my dead wife's paintings out of my house, while my daughter stood on the porch sipping champagne. She looked down at me and said 5 words that would cost her everything. Die in a nursing home, Dad. She had no idea I was already dialing the number that would end her life as she knew it. Hello, everyone. Before we continue, comment below and tell me where you are watching from so I know you are here with me. And a quick heads up. This story contains some fictional elements used for storytelling and learning purposes. Any resemblance to real people or places is coincidental. But the message behind it is meant to be useful and meaningful. The rain in Seattle has a personality. It does not crash down like a summer storm in Texas or howl like a hurricane in Florida. It seeps. It crawls under your collar, soaks through your shoes, and settles into your bones with the patience of something that knows it will outlast you. I have lived in this city for 43 years, and I have never once beaten the rain. But on this particular Tuesday afternoon in November, standing on the sidewalk of Queen Anne Hill with an IV bruise still fresh on my forearm, the rain felt personal. It felt like the city itself was trying to wash me away. My name is Dr. Raymond Ishida. I am 71 years old. I spent 32 years as a cardiothoracic surgeon at Swedish Medical Center, cutting open human chests and stitching broken hearts back together. I have held a beating heart in the palm of my hand and felt the moment a dying organ surges back to life under my fingers. These hands have pulled hundreds of people back from the edge of death. But today, these same hands were trembling from 4 hours of dialysis, and the only thing they were holding was a crumpled taxi receipt. The Uber had dropped me at the corner of Highland Drive because the road leading to my house was blocked. I did not understand why until I turned the corner and saw the truck. A large white moving truck sat in my driveway, its rear door rolled up, its cargo bay half full of furniture. My furniture, my dining table, my bookshelves, the leather reading chair Margaret had given me for our 30th anniversary. I stopped walking. 2 men in gray coveralls were carrying a large cardboard box down the front steps of my house, moving efficiently, without care, the way people handle things that do not belong to them. The house is a craftsman that I designed myself 30 years ago. It sits on a quarter-acre lot on the west slope of Queen Anne Hill, overlooking Elliott Bay and the Olympic Mountains. It has a wide front porch with tapered columns, cedar shake siding aged to silver gray, and a garden of rhododendrons that my wife Margaret planted the spring after we moved in. Every May, those rhododendrons bloom in clusters of deep purple and soft pink. For 30 years, Margaret would cut the first blossoms and place them in a blue ceramic vase on the kitchen table. The house is worth $2.3 million on the current market, but its value to me cannot be measured in currency. Every wall holds a conversation. Every creak in the floorboard is the echo of a footstep I still recognize. Margaret died 2 years ago. A stroke took her on a Sunday morning while she was making Earl Grey tea. I found her on the kitchen floor with the kettle whistling and her hand reaching toward the vase of rhododendrons, as if she were trying to hold on to something beautiful on her way out. And now strangers were stacking those memories in a truck like cargo. I walked faster, my legs unsteady. The dialysis always left me drained, and the anti-nausea medication was wearing off, leaving a metallic bitterness in my throat. Stage 2. Renal cell carcinoma. The oncologist said it was manageable, but manageable does not mean painless. And right now, my body felt like wet paper held together by habit and spite. I reached the front walkway. The rhododendrons were bare, their branches black and skeletal against the November sky. I climbed the porch steps, the second one groaning under my weight with the same creak it had made for 3 decades. I reached for the door handle. It did not turn. I tried again, twisting harder. Nothing. The deadbolt was engaged, and my brass key, the one I had carried since 1994, no longer fit the cylinder. Someone had changed the lock. I turned to the smart keypad beside the door. I punched in my code, the 4 digits I used every day. 1, 9, 5, 3. Margaret's birth year. The LED blinked red. Access denied. I pressed it again, slower, watching my trembling fingers. Red light. Access denied. Panic knotted in my stomach beside the nausea. I pressed the doorbell. The familiar chime echoed through the house. No one came. I pressed it again. I knocked. I pounded with the flat of my palm until the sound was wet and desperate against the heavy oak door. The curtain in the front window moved. Someone was watching me. Then I heard the deadbolt slide back. The door opened a few inches, catching on a security chain I had never seen before. Through the narrow gap, I saw her, Vanessa, my daughter, 40 years old. She had Margaret's auburn hair and my jawline, but the eyes looking at me through that crack belonged to a stranger. Cold, appraising, impatient. She was wearing a cream silk blouse and holding a glass of champagne. Behind her, in the hallway, I could see Garrett, her husband, directing a mover with a lazy wave of his hand. He wore a cashmere sweater and loafers that probably cost more than the mover earned in a week. "Dad," Vanessa said. Her voice was flat, the tone you use on a telemarketer. "What are you doing here?" Rain ran down my face, dripping off my chin onto the welcome mat that still read the Ishidas. "What am I doing here?" I repeated, hoarse and raw. "I live here, Vanessa. I just came from the clinic. Why are there movers in my house? Why is the lock changed?" She did not undo the chain. She leaned against the doorframe, blocking the gap with her body. "We talked about this, Dad," she said, sipping champagne. "We have never talked about anything like this. Open the door. I need to sit down. I need the bathroom. I have been at dialysis for 4 hours." She looked at me the way you look at a stain on white carpet. Not with hatred, with inconvenience. "You cannot come in right now," she said simply. "The house is being prepared." Prepared for what? She tilted her head, and a smile crossed her lips. Not a kind smile. The smile of someone holding every card and wanting you to know it. "Dad, you need to accept reality. You are too sick to live alone. Too sick to live alone." The words landed on me heavier than the rain. I gripped the porch railing, not because I needed the support, but because my hands needed something to hold before they did something I would regret. "What does that mean, Vanessa?" I asked, keeping my voice level. A surgeon learns to control his tone in a crisis. Panic is contagious. Calm is a weapon. "What exactly are you preparing my house for?" She sighed. The kind of theatrical exhale that tells you the person on the other side of the conversation considers you a burden. She reached behind her with her free hand and produced a glossy trifold brochure. She pushed it through the gap in the door chain. I caught it before it fell into the puddle at my feet. Harbor Light Senior Living. The cover showed a stock photograph of a smiling elderly woman being pushed in a wheelchair through a garden that looked nothing like any garden in the Pacific Northwest. The facility was located in Federal Way, 30 miles south of Seattle, in a strip of highway corridor known more for its discount furniture outlets than for quality health care. I knew Harbor Light by reputation. Every surgeon in the city did. It was a Medicaid warehouse, a place where families deposited their inconvenient elders and drove away without looking in the rearview mirror. "There is a bed available starting Friday," Vanessa said, her voice brightening, as though she were selling me a timeshare. "It is clean. They have a television room, and they handle patients in your condition. You will be comfortable, Dad." "My condition?" I repeated slowly. "You mean the cancer that my oncologist says is responding to treatment. You mean the kidneys that are functioning well enough to keep me alive and independent." "That is not what the doctors told us," she said, and I caught the lie immediately. The way her eyes shifted left for a fraction of a second. I had spent 3 decades reading the faces of anxious patients. I knew what deception looked like at a cellular level. "Vanessa, let me inside my house," I said. "Right now." "No." The word was absolute. She did not flinch. She did not soften it with an excuse. Just no. Delivered with the casual authority of someone who believes they have already won. Behind her, Garrett appeared in the hallway. He was holding one of my surgical display cases, the mahogany box that contained the instruments from my first successful solo heart bypass in 1989. A scalpel, a retractor, a pair of hemostats, each one engraved with my initials by the surgical team as a gift. Those tools represented the beginning of everything I had become. Garrett looked at the case, shrugged, and tossed it into a black garbage bag that sat open at the foot of the stairs. The glass face of the display cracked on impact. The sound traveled through the crack in the door and buried itself in my chest like a blade. "Garrett," I said, my voice dropping to something low and dangerous. "Take my instruments out of that bag." He did not even look at me. He turned back toward the living room, where the movers were dismantling my life piece by piece. Then I saw it. One of the movers was carrying a large flat object wrapped loosely in a bedsheet. The sheet slipped, and I recognized the frame. It was the triptych, 3 paintings on silk, created by my grandfather in the internment camp in Idaho, using pigments he had ground from rocks and berries. They depicted 3 scenes: a crane standing in still water, a mountain at dawn, and a child sleeping beneath a cherry blossom tree. They were the only possessions he had carried out of that camp. They had survived barbed wire, forced labor, decades of poverty, and the slow rebuilding of a family that had been told it did not belong in its own country. The mover carried them down the steps past me and slid them into the truck between a rolled carpet and a stack of dining chairs. He did not wrap them. He did not secure them. He just shoved them in like they were surplus inventory at a warehouse clearance. "Those paintings stay in this house," I said, turning back to Vanessa. My voice cracked for the first time. "Your great-grandfather made those in a prison camp. They are irreplaceable." Vanessa looked at me for a long moment. Then she reached into the hallway and picked something up. She pushed it through the gap in the door. "A black tablas. Your clothes," she said. "And that photograph of Mom you keep on the nightstand. The glass broke when I packed it, so be careful." I looked down at the bag. My entire life reduced to 30 gallons of black plastic. I bent down and opened it. Inside were a few shirts, 2 pairs of trousers, my shaving kit, and a framed photograph of Margaret on our wedding day. The glass was cracked diagonally across her face, splitting her smile in half. I held the photograph in the rain. Water pooled on the broken glass, distorting her features until she looked like she was underwater. Vanessa pulled something from her blouse pocket. A yellow sticky note. She peeled it off and pressed it onto the outside of the door at my eye level. The handwriting was hurried, aggressive, the letters slanting forward like they were running from the words behind them. "Die in a nursing home, old man. We have got plans for this place." She looked at me one last time. "Read it," she said. "Then leave, before I call the police for trespassing." She paused. "On my property." The door slammed. The deadbolt turned. The smart lock beeped as the system rearmed. I stood there. The rain fell. The street was silent, except for the low rumble of the moving truck's engine idling in the driveway. I looked at the yellow note. I read it again. I let every letter sear itself into the tissue of my brain, the way a surgeon memorizes the topography of an organ before making the first incision. I should have wept. A normal father would have wept. But the tears did not come. Something else did. Something cold and precise and familiar. It was the same feeling I had when a patient coded on the table, the moment when emotion becomes a liability and the only thing that matters is the next correct action. I picked up the garbage bag. I held Margaret's photograph against my chest to shield it from the rain. I looked at the house one final time. The warm light glowing in the windows, the smoke rising from the chimney, the rhododendron branches trembling in the wind like skeletal fingers. Then I turned and walked down the steps. My legs were weak, but my spine was straight. I did not look back. I reached the sidewalk and pulled out my phone. The screen was wet, and my fingers were numb, but they found the contact without hesitation. It rang twice. Nina. My voice was steady. The voice that had commanded operating rooms for 3 decades. It is Ray. I need you. They have taken everything. I paused and looked back at the warm glow of the house one final time. But they have made a mistake they do not know about yet. The hostel sat 3 blocks east of Pike Place Market in a narrow brick building squeezed between a tattoo parlor and a Vietnamese sandwich shop. A neon sign in the window read Puget Sound Backpackers in letters that buzzed and flickered like a dying heartbeat on a monitor. I pushed open the glass door, and the smell hit me instantly. Wet wool. Instant ramen. The sour sweetness of too many bodies, sharing too little ventilation. It was the kind of place where 20-year-old Europeans slept 4 to a room while exploring America on a budget. It was not the kind of place where a 71-year-old surgeon with cancer checked in for the night. The girl behind the counter had a nose ring and a paperback novel splayed open beside the register. She looked at me, looked at the garbage bag slung over my shoulder, and made no judgment. I appreciated that. Young people in Seattle have a practiced indifference that can feel like kindness when you are at your lowest. I need a bed, I said. Shared dorm is $28 a night, she said. Private room is $55. Cash or card? Cash. I reached into my coat and pulled out my wallet. I already knew my cards were useless. Something in my gut had told me the moment that lock blinked red. When your daughter changes the deadbolt on your front door, she does not stop there. Predators do not leave escape routes. They seal them all before the prey even knows it is trapped. I counted the bills under the counter light. A 20, 2 20s, a 10, a 50, $110. That was everything. The entire liquid net worth of a man who had earned millions over a 32-year surgical career. I peeled off 55 and slid it across the counter. Private room, please. She handed me a key attached to a wooden paddle with the number 7 scratched into it. Down the hall, last door on the left, she said. Bathroom is shared, end of the corridor. The room was the size of a hospital supply closet. A single bed with a thin mattress and a wool blanket that smelled of industrial detergent. A wooden chair. A window that looked out onto a brick wall 3 feet away. The radiator under the window was clicking but producing no heat. I dropped the garbage bag onto the floor and sat on the edge of the bed. The springs groaned beneath me. I pulled out my phone. My fingers were still numb from the rain, and the screen was smeared with water. But I found the number for my bank's priority service line. I had been a client for 26 years. They knew my voice. They knew my accounts. A woman named Sandra answered on the 3rd ring. Dr. Ishida, how can I help you this evening? Sandra, I need you to check my accounts, I said. All of them. Checking, savings, and the joint brokerage. Of course. One moment. I heard the soft percussion of a keyboard. Then silence. The kind of silence that stretches too long and tells you the news is not good before a single word is spoken. I knew that silence. I had created that silence myself 1,000 times, standing beside a hospital bed, waiting for the right way to say the wrong thing. Dr. Ishida, Sandra said, her professional warmth replaced by a careful hesitation. I am showing that a series of transfers were initiated yesterday morning. The checking account, the savings account, and the liquid portion of the brokerage have all been moved. The combined total was $520,000. The current balances across all accounts are 0. The room tilted. I gripped the edge of the mattress. Transferred by whom? I asked, though I already knew the answer. The way you know a diagnosis, before the scan confirms it. You feel it in the architecture of the symptoms. You feel it in the pattern of the disease. The transactions were authorized by Vanessa Ishida Moore, Sandra said. She presented documentation showing her as a joint account holder with survivorship rights, along with a deed of co-ownership for the property at your registered address. The documentation was filed with King County 3 months ago. 3 months. She had been planning this for 3 months, while sitting across from me at Sunday dinners, while driving me to chemotherapy appointments, while holding my hand in the waiting room and telling me everything was going to be fine. "The credit cards?" I asked. "All 3 cards on the account have been reported lost by the co-holder. Replacements were issued to the primary address." The primary address. My house. The house I could no longer enter. "Thank you, Sandra," I said, and ended the call before she could hear the crack in my voice. I sat in the silence of that tiny room. The radiator clicked. A siren wailed somewhere in the distance, fading into the rain. I looked down at my hands, resting on my knees. These hands had rebuilt hearts. They had reconnected arteries thinner than thread. They had held the boundary between life and death for 32 years. And now they were empty, shaking in a room that cost $55 a night. I reached into the garbage bag and carefully pulled out Margaret's photograph. The crack in the glass ran diagonally across her face, but her eyes were still intact. Dark brown, warm, amused. She was 26 in this picture, wearing the white dress she had sewn herself for our wedding because we could not afford a real one. I could still hear her laugh. I could still feel the way she pressed her forehead against mine when she wanted to tell me something important without words. The last thing she ever said to me was on that Sunday morning, 2 minutes before the stroke. She was standing at the kitchen counter, pouring hot water into her favorite cup, the blue one with the chipped handle. She turned to me and said, "Raymond, promise me the house will always be a place where someone is loved." I had promised. I did not know then what that promise would cost me. I set the photograph on the windowsill, leaning it against the cold glass. Margaret looked out at the brick wall as if she were studying it for structural flaws. Then I closed my eyes and let my grandfather's voice rise from the deep well of memory where I kept the things that mattered most. I was 8 years old, sitting on his lap in the small apartment above the dry cleaner. He smelled of sawdust and green tea. He was showing me a photograph of the camp. Rows of tar paper barracks stretching across a flat Idaho desert. "They took everything from us, Raymond," he said, his voice quiet and steady. The voice of a man who had learned that volume is not the same as strength. Our homes, our businesses, our dignity. They put us behind wire and told us we were the enemy. He paused and tapped his temple with one calloused finger. "But they could not take what we kept in here. The things you carry in your mind, Raymond, no one can confiscate." I opened my eyes. The hostel room was dark now. The neon sign from the tattoo parlor next door pulsed red and blue through the window, painting the walls in the colors of an ambulance. I had $55 left. I had cancer in my kidney and poison in my veins. I had no home, no car, no credit card, and no family. But I had what my grandfather kept. I had what no one could confiscate. I had the knowledge of what I had built, where I had hidden it, and why my daughter's entire scheme was constructed on a foundation that did not exist. I picked up Margaret's photograph and held it close. "I kept my promise, Margaret," I whispered to the cracked glass. "The house is safe. She just does not know it yet." The text arrived at 6 in the morning while I was sitting on the edge of the hostel bed, watching gray light fail to penetrate the brick wall outside my window. My phone buzzed on the wooden chair where I had left it, charging with a cable borrowed from the front desk. "Daddy, let us meet for breakfast. Starbucks Reserve on Capitol Hill. 8 o'clock. I want to explain everything. And make sure you are okay. I love you so much. I love you so much." 4 words strung together like decorations on a knife. The same fingers that typed them had drained my accounts, changed my locks, and thrown my dead wife's photograph into a garbage bag. I typed back a single line. "I will be there." I washed my face in the shared bathroom, put on the cleanest shirt from the garbage bag, and walked out into the morning rain. The Starbucks Reserve on Capitol Hill is not a regular coffee shop. It is a cathedral of coffee. All exposed timber and brass fixtures and baristas who describe pour-over techniques with the reverence of sommeliers. I arrived at 7:45 and chose a corner booth with a clear sightline to the entrance. I ordered a black coffee. $2.90. I had $52.10 remaining to my name. I wrapped my hands around the mug and waited. At 8:12, they walked in. Vanessa entered first, wearing a Burberry trench coat belted tightly at the waist. Her hair was pulled back in a sleek ponytail. She carried an oversized Hermes bag in the crook of her elbow, the leather so supple it seemed to breathe. Behind her came Garrett in a navy blazer over a fitted white shirt, his collar open to reveal a thin gold chain. He looked like a man who had slept well and worried about nothing. But I am a surgeon. I do not read surfaces. I read the tissue beneath. His left leg had a slight hitch in the stride, the unconscious tension of a man carrying invisible weight. His eyes moved too quickly, scanning the room not for people but for exits. And when he reached up to adjust his collar, I saw it. An Omega Seamaster, ceramic bezel, blue dial, approximately $8,000 retail. The bracelet still had the rigid shininess of metal that has not yet conformed to a wrist. Brand new. $8,000 on a man who claimed he could not pay his mortgage last year while living in my house, sleeping in my bed, drinking coffee my money paid for. I filed the observation and said nothing. A good surgeon does not announce findings during the exploratory phase. He catalogs. He maps. He waits for the full picture. Before making the first cut, they slid into the booth across from me. Vanessa reached over and took my hands. Her palms were warm and lotioned, her grip firm, the grip of a woman who wants you to feel held while she picks your pocket. Daddy, you look awful. Have you been sleeping? Have you been taking your medication? I withdrew my hands slowly. I slept fine. Tell me what is happening with the house. She exchanged a glance with Garrett. Quick. A fraction of a second. The glance of co-conspirators confirming their script. Dad, she began, leaning forward. The cancer is advancing faster than expected. Dr. Patel told us privately that you may only have months. She was lying. I knew because I had sat across from Dr. Patel 2 days ago and heard the opposite. The tumor was stable. The kidney function was holding. Patel had used the word encouraged. He had smiled when he said it. Vanessa was weaponizing my mortality, turning my illness into a crowbar to pry open my defenses. Months, I repeated, letting my voice tremble slightly. Not because I was afraid, because I wanted her to believe I was. Yes, Daddy, she whispered, squeezing the table edge for dramatic effect. That is why we had to act fast. We cannot let you deteriorate alone in that big house. You could fall. You could have an episode. We would never forgive ourselves. Garrett nodded along like a dashboard bobblehead, his jaw tight, his leg bouncing under the table hard enough to make the coffee ripple in my cup. So what is the plan? I asked, keeping my expression vacant and confused, the face of a frightened old man looking for someone to trust. Vanessa reached into her Hermes bag and produced a thin folder. She slid a single document across the table. The heading was printed in bold serif font. Voluntary relinquishment of property interest. This just formalizes what we discussed, she said, uncapping a pen and pressing it into my hand. It says you agree that the transition is in your best interest. Once you sign, we can place you at Harbor Light by Friday. You will be warm and cared for. I looked at the document, then at the pen, then at Garrett. He was not looking at me. His attention was locked on his phone, placed face up on the table beside his coffee. The screen was bright. The font was large, his display settings magnified. The kind of adjustment people make when they spend too much time staring at screens in dim rooms. I have excellent peripheral vision, 32 years of monitoring multiple screens, instrument trays, and vital signs simultaneously trained my eyes to capture information from the edges of my visual field without turning my head. It is a skill that has saved lives on the operating table. Today, it was about to save mine. The phone showed an email. The sender line read, J Park Pacific Rim Holdings. The preview text was short and brutal. Wire $700,000 by Friday close of business, or I contact the FBI regarding the Bellevue project. This is not a negotiation. No more extensions. I read it in less than 2 seconds without moving my eyes from the document in front of me. My pulse did not change. My expression did not shift. But inside, behind the mask of the confused old man, every piece of the puzzle snapped into place with the precision of a surgical clamp locking onto a bleeding artery. The omega made sense. The desperation made sense. The urgency to sell a $2.3 million house in less than a week made sense. This was not about my health. This was not about my care. Garrett owed $700,000 to people who used the FBI as a threat the way loan sharks use baseball bats. He was drowning, and he had decided to use my house as a life raft. They were not selling my home to save me. They were selling it to save him. And Vanessa, my daughter, the girl I had carried on my shoulders through Pike Place Market on Saturday mornings, was the one holding the auction paddle. I looked up from the document and met her eyes across the table. She smiled at me. That same cold, confident smile from the porch. She had no idea that I had just read her husband's death sentence over the rim of my coffee cup. I lowered my eyes back to the document on the table. The words, "voluntary relinquishment of property interest," stared up at me in crisp black ink. Vanessa's pen was warm in my fingers. She had probably been holding it in her palm for minutes, keeping it body temperature, a small, unconscious gesture that told me she had rehearsed this moment. I knew what this paper was. It was not a formality. It was not protection. It was the last padlock on a cage she had been building around me for 3 months. The moment I signed this, she would have a paper trail that showed voluntary consent. A judge would look at this document, see my signature, and conclude that the confused old man had agreed to everything. No coercion, no fraud, just a sick father making responsible decisions with the help of his loving daughter. But I also knew something she did not. I knew that $700,000 was due by Friday. I knew that whatever Garrett had done with a project in Bellevue had attracted the attention of people who used federal investigators as leverage. I knew that the beautiful omega on his wrist and the Hermes on her arm were purchased with money they did not have, facades maintained on borrowed time. And I knew that if I refused to sign, they would escalate. They would pursue the guardianship. They would bring in doctors. They would find a way to declare me incompetent and take everything by force. So I decided to give them exactly what they wanted, but not the way they expected. A surgeon's signature is a distinctive thing. Mine has been on thousands of documents over 3 decades. Operative reports, consent forms, discharge papers, prescription pads. It is a precise, fluid motion, the product of a hand trained to make marks that matter. The R in Raymond has a sharp downstroke, clean as a scalpel incision. The I in Ishida has a slight flourish, a habit I picked up from my mentor, Dr. Yamamoto, who believed that a surgeon should sign his name the way he closes a wound, with confidence and finality. Beneath the full name, I always draw a single, straight underline. Ruler, perfect. It is muscle memory. It is as much a part of me as my fingerprints. I let my hand shake. It was not difficult. The dialysis had already compromised my fine motor control. All I had to do was stop fighting the tremor, instead of compensating for it the way I had been trained to do in the operating room. I let the pen wobble. I let the tip stutter across the paper. I wrote my name in a jagged, uneven scrawl that drifted below the signature line and tilted to the right, like a man falling. The R was soft and rounded. Nothing like the sharp incision of my real signature. The I had no flourish. The underline was absent entirely. To the untrained eye, it looked like the signature of a 71-year-old man whose hands no longer obeyed him. A man diminished by illness. A man who could barely hold a pen. But to a forensic handwriting expert, to a judge, comparing this signature against the specimen on file at the county recorder's office, at my bank, on 32 years of hospital documents, it would look like exactly what it was, A signature that did not match. A signature made under duress, or by a person not of sound mind, or by someone other than the named individual. I had just handed them a bomb disguised as a surrender. "There," I whispered, letting the pen slip from my fingers onto the table. "Is that okay?" Garrett snatched the paper before the ink was dry. He stared at it, and a grin broke across his face that was pure animal relief. The grin of a man who has been holding his breath underwater and finally tastes air. He did not examine the signature. He did not compare it to anything. He saw a name on a line, and his brain translated it into $700,000 and a plane ticket out of the country. "Perfect," he said, shoving the paper into a leather portfolio and standing up immediately. "We need to go, Vanessa. The title company is waiting." Vanessa stood. She looked at me, and for a moment, a flicker passed across her face. It was not guilt. It was something closer to pity. The kind of pity a hunter feels for a deer caught in a snare. Brief. Clinical. Instantly dismissed. "Finish your coffee, Dad," she said. "We will come get you tonight to take you to Harbor Light. Try to rest." She did not hug me. She did not touch my shoulder. She simply turned and walked toward the door, her heels clicking on the hardwood floor with the rhythm of a countdown. Garrett followed close behind, his phone already in his hand, his thumb moving across the screen before he even reached the sidewalk. I watched them through the window. They climbed into Vanessa's white BMW and pulled out of the parking space with the urgency of people fleeing a crime scene, which, in a sense, they were. I sat alone in the booth. The cafe hummed around me with the soft sounds of steam wands and murmured conversations. A barista called out a name that was not mine. Rain streaked down the glass beside me in thin silver lines. I picked up my coffee and drank the last of it. It was cold and bitter, but I savored it. Bitterness has a way of sharpening the mind when sweetness would only dull it. I thought about what I had just done. I had given them a forged signature on a document that would not survive scrutiny. I had let them believe the game was over, while the real game was just beginning. But a signature on a relinquishment form was only one piece of their machine. They still had the fraudulent deed. They still had the drained accounts. They still had the momentum of people who believe they are smarter than everyone in the room. I needed to dismantle the machine itself. And for that, I needed someone who understood the engineering of legal warfare, the way I understood the engineering of the human heart. I pulled out my phone and opened the map application. My fingers were steady now. The tremor I had performed for Vanessa was gone, replaced by the calm precision that had guided me through thousands of operations. I typed in my destination, Bainbridge Island Ferry Terminal. Departure in 47 minutes. I stood up, buttoned my coat, and placed $2 on the table. It was nearly half of what I had left, but I was not counting pennies anymore. I was counting hours. Garrett had until Friday. Vanessa had until the title company processed the sale, and I had until the next ferry to Bainbridge Island, where a young woman with a law degree and a debt of gratitude was about to receive the most important case of her career. I stepped out into the rain. It was lighter now, more mist than downpour. I turned south toward the waterfront and walked with a steadiness that surprised even me. My legs were still weak. My kidneys were still failing. But my hands, the hands that had held beating hearts, the hands that had just written a forgery designed to look like surrender, those hands were perfectly still. I had a lawyer to see. A lawyer who owed her life to these hands. And these hands were about to perform their most important operation yet. The ferry pulled away from Pier 52 at 9:17 in the morning, and I stood on the upper deck watching Seattle shrink behind a curtain of gray rain. The diesel engines hummed beneath my feet, a low vibration that reminded me of the heart-lung machines I had operated for 31 years. 35 minutes across Puget Sound. 35 minutes to think. Margaret and I had taken this exact ferry 3 months before her stroke. We stood right here, her hand inside the pocket of my wool coat because she had forgotten her gloves again. She pointed at a pod of orcas breaking the surface near Bainbridge, and she laughed. That laugh. It sounded like the first warm day after a long winter. I never heard it again. I closed my eyes and let the salt air fill my lungs. The dialysis catheter under my collarbone ached from the cold, and my knees had not stopped hurting since I slept on that hostile mattress. But pain was an old companion. I had operated on beating hearts for 6 hours straight with a herniated disc. Pain does not scare me. Betrayal does. The ferry docked at Winslow Way at 9:52. I walked 3 blocks south, past the bakery that smelled like sourdough and brown butter, past the bookshop with the crooked cat in the window, until I reached a narrow 2-story building overlooking Eagle Harbor. The sign on the glass door read, Alvarez Law, Elder Protection and Estate Litigation. Nina Alvarez was 33 years old, 5'4", with dark brown eyes that never blinked when she was thinking. Her mother was Mexican. Her father was Filipino, a carpenter who built church pews in Tacoma. When Nina was 15, her mitral valve failed. Her father had no insurance, no savings, nothing but calloused hands and a prayer. I performed the surgery for free on a Saturday morning because a child's heart should never stop beating over a bill. Nina graduated top of her class at Harvard Law. She sent me a letter every Christmas for 18 years, and every letter ended the same way. I owe you a heartbeat, Dr. Ishida. Today I was here to collect. She opened the door before I knocked, as if she had been watching the harbor for the ferry. Her office was small, a desk, 2 chairs, a filing cabinet, and a framed photograph of her father holding a saw. She poured me green tea without asking, and sat across from me with a yellow legal pad. I told her everything. The rain, the moving truck, the changed lock, the garbage bag, the broken photograph of Margaret, the sticky note that read, Die in a nursing home, old man. I told her about the hostel and the $52 in my pocket. I told her about the Starbucks meeting, the Burberry trench coat, the $8,000 Omega watch on Garrett's wrist, and the voluntary relinquishment form I had signed with a deliberately wrong signature. I told her about the email on Garrett's phone from Jay Park at Pacific Rim Holdings, demanding $700,000 by Friday, or the FBI would be contacted about the Bellevue project. Nina did not interrupt. She wrote everything down in small, precise handwriting. When I finished, she turned to her laptop and opened the King County Recorder database. Her fingers moved fast. Within 4 minutes she found it, a quit-claim deed, filed exactly 3 months ago, adding Vanessa Ishida Holt as joint tenant with right of survivorship to the property at 4417 West Highland Drive, Seattle. My house. My signature was on the deed. Except it was not my signature. Nina zoomed in on the scan. The R in Raymond was soft and rounded. My R has always been sharp, like a scalpel stroke. There was no flourish on the I in Ishida. I have signed my name the same way for 40 years. Every surgical consent form, every prescription, every birthday card to Margaret. The I always carries a small upward flourish, and the underline beneath the full name was missing entirely. I always underline. It is a habit I picked up from my grandfather, who signed his name that way in the relocation camp at Minidoka in 1942. This was a forgery. Clean. Professional. But wrong. Nina leaned back in her chair. Then she typed another search. She pulled up a document I had almost forgotten existed, even though it was the most important piece of paper in my life. The Margaret Ishida Irrevocable Trust, filed 4 years ago with the Washington Secretary of State. I had transferred the house into this trust 6 months after Margaret died. She asked me to. It was the last thing she asked me before the stroke took her words away. Protect the house, Ray. Promise me. I promised. And I kept that promise. The trust was irrevocable. I was the sole trustee. Vanessa was listed only as a contingent beneficiary, meaning she would inherit the property upon my death, but only if the trustee approved distribution. The house did not belong to me personally. It belonged to the trust. That meant the quit-claim deed filed by Vanessa was legally meaningless. You cannot transfer property you do not own. The forged joint tenancy was a fraud committed against an entity, not just a person. Nina's eyes narrowed. She typed again and found something that made her jaw tighten. An involuntary guardianship petition, filed 4 days ago in King County Superior Court by Vanessa Ishida Holt. The petition alleged that Dr. Raymond Ishida suffered from progressive cognitive decline secondary to chronic renal failure and was unable to manage personal and financial affairs. A hearing was scheduled in 6 days. If that petition succeeded, the court could appoint Vanessa as my legal guardian. She would become the successor trustee of the Margaret Ishida Irrevocable Trust. She could then liquidate every asset, sell the house, and funnel the money wherever she wanted. The quit-claim deed was the first move. The guardianship was the second. They were building a cage around me, bar by bar. Nina picked up her phone. She dialed a number from memory and spoke calmly. "This is Nina Alvarez. Washington State Bar, number 44712. I need to speak with Agent Morrison in the Financial Crimes Division. I am reporting title fraud, wire fraud, elder financial abuse, and forgery of public records." She looked at me while the phone rang. I looked back at her and said, "Tell him the victim is done being a victim. We are going to let them build their own trap, and then we are going to lock it shut." Nina almost smiled. Almost. Outside the window, the rain had stopped. For the first time in 3 days, a thin line of sunlight broke through the clouds over Eagle Harbor. I watched it hit the water and thought about Margaret, about her laugh, about the promise I made. The house was safe. They just did not know it yet. Nina hung up the phone and placed it face down on the desk like a surgeon setting down a used instrument. Agent Morrison had listened for 11 minutes without interruption. That was a good sign. People who interrupt do not take you seriously. People who stay silent are already building a case. She looked at me across the desk. He wants documentation. The forged deed, the trust filing, the guardianship petition, and the Pacific Rim email, if we can get a screenshot. He said he will open a preliminary inquiry, but he cannot move until we give him something physical. Digital copies are not enough for a warrant. I nodded. I understood evidence. In surgery, you do not cut until the imaging confirms what your hands suspect. We needed proof that was heavy enough to hold in a courtroom. "There is something else," Nina said. She turned her laptop toward me. On the screen was a Washington State banking regulation page. "They drained $520,000 from your accounts using the forged joint tenancy. But that money did not disappear. It went somewhere. If we can trace the wire, we can prove the connection between the theft and the Pacific Rim debt." I leaned forward. My dialysis catheter pulled against the tape on my collarbone, and I winced. "How do we trace it?" "We subpoena the bank records. But that takes time. Weeks. Maybe longer. We do not have weeks." She tapped her pen against the legal pad. "The guardianship hearing is in 6 days. If Vanessa gets that approved before we have enough for Morrison, she becomes your legal guardian. She becomes the successor trustee. And everything Margaret built disappears." 6 days. 144 hours. I had performed a double valve replacement in 9 hours once, with a patient whose blood pressure dropped to 60 over 40 on the table. I kept him alive with my hands and my voice and a team that trusted me. 6 days was a lifetime compared to that. "There is another way," I said. Nina raised an eyebrow. I reached into the inside pocket of my jacket, the same jacket I had worn out of the house in the rain 3 days ago, and pulled out a small leather notebook. It was brown, worn smooth at the edges, with Margaret's initials embossed in gold on the cover, MKI Margaret Kimiko Ishida. She gave me this notebook on our 30th anniversary and told me to write down the things that mattered. I wrote down everything. I opened it to a page near the back. The handwriting was mine, small and precise, written in blue ink 18 months ago. It read, DBS Bank, Singapore. Account number 741-0039-8821. Balance as of March, $682,000. Nina stared at the numbers. You have a Singapore account. Margaret opened it in 2019. Her mother was born in Osaka, but married a British merchant who had banking connections in Southeast Asia. Margaret inherited the account when her mother died. She transferred it into both our names, then moved it into the trust before she had her stroke. It is a trust asset. Vanessa does not know it exists. Nina sat back. The leather of her chair creaked. Outside, a seagull screamed over Eagle Harbor. She picked up her pen and began writing fast. $682,000, she said, almost to herself. That is our war chest. I watched her calculate. The pen moved like a scalpel, cutting through possibilities, discarding what was useless, keeping what was sharp. After 3 minutes, she looked up. Here is what we do. First, I contact DBS Bank Singapore and confirm the trust's authority to wire funds domestically. That takes 24 hours with the right paperwork. Second, we use the trust funds to hire a forensic accountant. I know one in Bellevue, a woman named Grace Yoon. She can trace the $520,000 from your accounts to wherever Garrett sent it. If it went to Pacific Rim Holdings, that is wire fraud. Federal. Morrison can move on that. She paused. Her eyes were sharp now, the same way they had been when she was 15 and I told her she would survive the surgery. She believed me then. I believed her now. Third, she continued, we do something Vanessa and Garrett will never expect. We buy the debt. I blinked. What do you mean? Pacific Rim Holdings is not a bank. It is a private lending operation. Garrett owes them $700,000. Private debt can be purchased. If the trust buys Garrett's debt from Pacific Rim, the trust becomes his creditor. You become the man he owes $700,000 to. And more importantly, we gain access to the original loan documents, which will show what the Bellevue project really was and why Pacific Rim was threatening to call the FBI. The room was quiet. I could hear the tide shifting beneath the harbor pilings. A boat horn sounded in the distance, low and steady, like the long beep of a flatline monitor before you hit the defibrillator. Can we do that in 6 days? I asked. We can do it in 4. Pacific Rim wants their money. They do not care who pays. I will contact J Park directly and offer a discounted purchase. Creditors holding distressed debt usually accept 80 to 85 cents on the dollar. That means we could acquire the full $700,000 obligation for somewhere between $560,000 and $595,000. I looked down at the notebook. $682,000 in the Singapore account. Enough to buy the debt and still have reserves for legal fees. There is a risk, Nina said. If Vanessa finds out about the Singapore account before we move the money, she could petition the court to freeze trust assets as part of the guardianship case. We need to act before that hearing. Then we act now. Nina nodded. She opened a new browser tab and began drafting a wire authorization letter to DBS Bank Singapore, referencing the Margaret Ishida Irrevocable Trust, taxpayer identification number, and my trustee credentials. She printed 2 copies, slid them across the desk, and handed me a pen. I signed. The R was sharp. The I carried its flourish. The underline was firm and straight, just like my grandfather taught me in the stories he told about Minidoka, about dignity, about writing your name like you mean every letter. Nina picked up the phone again. Grace? It is Nina Alvarez. I need a forensic wire trace on a $520,000 transfer out of Washington Federal, originating 3 months ago. Destination unknown. I need it in 72 hours. She paused. Yes. I know that is fast. The client is a 71-year-old man with cancer who just had his life stolen by his own daughter. We are getting it back. She hung up and looked at me. Go back to the hostel. Sleep. Eat something. I will call you tomorrow, when the wire clears. I stood. My knees cracked. My back ached. My catheter itched. But my hands were steady. They had always been steady. I walked out of Nina's office into the afternoon light. The rain had not returned. The harbor was calm, the water reflecting the pale sky like a surgical lamp reflecting off stainless steel. I buttoned my jacket, felt the notebook against my chest, and headed toward the ferry terminal. Margaret's voice came to me, the way it always did when I was about to do something irreversible. Be precise, Ray. Be patient. And do not miss. I never missed. 2 days passed. I stayed in the hostel and ate once a day at a Vietnamese restaurant on Pike Place, where a bowl of pho cost $6.75. The owner, a woman named Lan, never asked why a 71-year-old man in a wrinkled jacket sat alone in the corner booth every afternoon staring at a leather notebook. She just refilled my tea and left me alone. Kindness does not always need a conversation. Nina called on the second evening. Her voice was controlled, the way mine used to sound when I told a patient's family that the surgery went well. But the next 48 hours were critical. The wire cleared. $682,000 from DBS Singapore is now in the trust's domestic operating account at Washington Federal. Grace traced the $520,000. It went to 3 places. $190,000 to Pacific Rim Holdings as a partial payment on Garrett's debt. $210,000 to a brokerage account in Garrett's name at Schwab, and $120,000 to a joint checking account Vanessa opened at Chase 6 weeks ago. She has been spending it. $17,000 on furniture. $9,000 on a Hermes handbag. $4,000 on a weekend at the Fairmont Olympic. I closed my eyes. $120,000. My money. Spent on handbags and hotel rooms while I ate $6 soup in a hostel. There is more, Nina said. Grace found a 4th transaction. $43,000 wired to a travel agency in Bellevue called Emerald Horizons. The booking reference shows 2 first-class tickets to Zurich, departing next Thursday. 1 week from today. One way. Zurich. They were planning to run, sell the house, pay off Pacific Rim, and disappear into a Swiss bank account. Before anyone noticed, the old man was still alive. I have contacted Jay Park at Pacific Rim. Nina continued. He agreed to sell Garrett's full $700,000 obligation for $560,000, 80 cents on the dollar. The trust wire goes out tomorrow morning. By Wednesday afternoon, you will legally own every penny of Garrett's debt. And all the original loan documents, including the Bellevue project file. I opened my eyes. The hostel ceiling was water-stained and cracked. A spider had built a web in the corner above the window. I watched it work, patient and precise, anchoring each thread before moving to the next. That spider understood something most people do not. You build the trap before the prey knows you are hunting. Nina, I need to get inside the house. Silence on the line. Then, carefully, Ray. If you break in, anything we find is inadmissible. And if Garrett catches you, he could use it to support the guardianship petition. They could say you are unstable. I am not going to break in. I am going to walk in through a door they do not know exists. I told her about the basement. When Margaret and I bought the house in 1994, the previous owner, an eccentric retired professor named Donald Whitfield, had installed a secondary exit in the basement. It was not on any official blueprint. Whitfield had been a Cold War academic who studied Soviet nuclear strategy, and he believed Seattle was a primary target. He built a small concrete passage from the basement utility room to a ground-level window hidden behind the rhododendron hedge on the north side of the property. The window was concealed by a wooden panel that looked like part of the foundation. You had to know it was there. Margaret and I discovered it during renovation in 1995. We kept it. We never told anyone. Not the insurance company, not the neighbors, not Vanessa. Margaret used to joke that it was our escape route in case the in-laws visited too long. I laughed every time. Now the joke had turned into a strategy. The window has a manual latch on the outside, I told Nina. No electronic lock. No alarm sensor. The security system Vanessa installed only covers the doors, the first-floor windows, and the back patio. The basement window is below grade and behind a hedge that has not been trimmed in 2 years. I can get in without triggering anything. Nina was quiet for a long moment. What exactly are you looking for? Evidence. Physical evidence. The original forged deed, if they kept a copy. Garrett's laptop. He is not careful. When I saw him at the cafe, his phone screen was open, with no passcode. I guarantee his laptop is the same. If he has communication with Pacific Rim, records of the Bellevue project, or anything connecting him to the wire fraud, it will be on that machine. Ray, even if you access the laptop, we need the evidence to be legally obtained. Morrison cannot use stolen data. I am not going to steal anything. I am going to photograph it. And I am going to do it inside a house that belongs to the Raymond Ishida Irrevocable Trust, of which I am the sole trustee. I have legal authority to enter trust property. The forged deed does not change that because the deed is invalid. The house never left the trust. Another silence. I could hear Nina breathing. I could hear the harbor outside her office window, the gentle slap of water against the dock pilings. Then she spoke. You are right. As trustee, you have legal standing to enter and inspect the property. The trust agreement grants you full access. The forged deed purports to transfer ownership, but since the property was already in an irrevocable trust, the transfer is void ab initio. From the beginning, you are not breaking into someone else's house. You are entering your own. Then I go tomorrow night. Vanessa and Garrett leave the house every Wednesday evening. She has a real estate networking event at the Four Seasons downtown. He goes to a poker game in Bellevue. They leave around 7 and do not come back until after 11. How do you know their schedule? Because for 40 years I watched my daughter live her life. I know her patterns, the way I know the rhythm of a heartbeat on a monitor. Wednesday is her night out. It has been since she was 25. Nina exhaled slowly. I cannot officially advise you to do this, but I am not going to stop you. If you find anything, photograph it. Do not touch the originals, and send everything to my encrypted email immediately. I will have Grace standing by to authenticate the metadata. I agreed. We hung up. I sat on the edge of the hostel bed and looked at my hands. They were 71 years old. The knuckles were swollen. The skin was thin. A faint tremor lived in my left ring finger from the dialysis. But these hands had held beating hearts. They had tied sutures thinner than a human hair. They had brought people back from death. Tomorrow night, these hands would open a hidden window, crawl through a passage built by a man afraid of nuclear war, and find the evidence that would end my daughter's scheme. I turned off the lamp. The spider in the corner was still working, silent and deliberate in the dark. Wednesday night arrived, the way surgery days used to arrive. Quietly. With a calm that most people mistake for peace, but is really the body preparing for controlled violence. I left the hostel at 6:30. The sun had dropped behind the Olympic Mountains, and Queen Anne Hill was turning blue. I wore black pants, a dark gray fleece Margaret bought me 3 Christmases ago, and brown leather Oxfords not designed for crawling through basement windows. A surgeon works with what he has. I took the number 13 bus to West Highland Drive and walked 7 minutes uphill. I watched from behind a parked van. At 6:51, Garrett's black Audi backed out, followed by Vanessa's white BMW. The Audi turned right toward Bellevue. Poker. The BMW turned left toward downtown. Four Seasons. Networking. I waited 11 minutes. The street emptied. A dog barked 2 houses down, then stopped. The air hung heavy and wet. A Pacific Northwest evening that wraps around you like a damp towel. I crossed the street and pushed through the rhododendron hedge on the north side. Margaret used to trim it every April. Nobody had touched it since she died. Branches scraped my arms. I found the wooden panel flush against the foundation, painted the same gray as the concrete. I pressed the left edge. It swung inward on its original hinges. Behind it sat the window. 30 inches wide, 24 inches tall, with the brass latch Donald Whitfield installed in 1963. I turned it. The click was small and clean, like the snap of a surgical clamp. I lowered myself feet first and dropped 3 feet onto the basement concrete. Pain shot through both knees. I stood still for 10 seconds. The furnace hummed. A clock ticked somewhere above. Nothing else. The basement smelled like dust and the faint ghost of Margaret's lavender sachets. I climbed the stairs to the first floor and stopped. The living room was unrecognizable. A white sectional sofa that belonged in a magazine. A glass coffee table with sharp edges. A television the size of a dining table mounted on the wall where my grandfather's 3-panel silk painting used to hang. The crane, the mountain, the child. He carried that painting out of Minidoka in 1945, wrapped in a flour sack, and gave it to me on my wedding day. It was gone. I did not let myself feel it. Surgeons do not feel during the operation. They feel after, in the parking lot, in the dark. During the operation, there is only the task. Upstairs. The master bedroom had become Vanessa and Garrett's room. A king-sized bed with a gray headframe. A walk-in closet stuffed with new clothes. Price tags still dangling from half of them. Cologne on the dresser that cost more than my weekly dialysis copay. Garrett's silver MacBook Pro sat on the desk by the window. Open. Screen dark. I touched the trackpad and it lit up. No password. No fingerprint lock. Careless the way arrogant men are always careless. I opened the email application and began photographing with my phone, holding it steady, the way I held a camera during laparoscopic procedures. Each shot framed, each shot focused. First email. From J. Park, Pacific Rim Holdings. 5 weeks old. Garrett. The Bellevue project lost $420,000 in the third quarter. Your guarantee is callable. Wire $700,000 by month end or we escalate. This is not negotiation. Second email. Garrett's reply. Working on the house sale. The old man has cancer and kidney failure. Will not last long. Funds within 60 days. Third email. A chain between Vanessa and Kevin Tan, a broker at Windermere. Vanessa had sent listing details for 4417 West Highland Drive. Price $2,300,000. Kevin's reply named a buyer. David Chen, a tech executive relocating from San Francisco. $2,250,000 cash. 14-day close. Fourth email. This one stopped my hands. From Vanessa to Garrett. 9 days ago. Subject line. 1 word. Plan. Body. 4 lines. Step 1. Guardianship petition. Step 2. Sell house through Kevin. Step 3. Pay Pacific Rim. Step 4. Zurich. Delete this after reading. Garrett had not deleted it. I photographed that email 4 times from different angles. Then I opened a desktop folder labeled Dad. Inside were scans of the forged quitclaim deed. The voluntary relinquishment form I signed at Starbucks. The Harbor Light Senior Living application, with my name filled in. And a draft of the guardianship petition. Handwritten notes in the margins. One note in Vanessa's writing read, Dr. Patel will sign cognitive assessment for $5,000. Confirmed. A bribed doctor. My daughter paid $5,000 for a stranger to declare me incompetent. She grew up watching me save lives in operating rooms, and she bought a piece of paper that said my mind was gone. I photographed every page. Then I opened one last folder. PRH. Bellevue. Original loan agreements between Garrett and Pacific Rim. $700,000 investment in a mixed-use development that collapsed 8 months ago. Garrett had personally guaranteed the full amount. 17 photographs total. I closed the laptop. The screen went dark. I had not moved a single document. The only evidence of my presence was warmth on the trackpad, and that would disappear in seconds. I sent all 17 images to Nina's encrypted email. Then I retraced my steps. Down the stairs. Through the basement. Out the window. Through the hedge. I closed the panel and latched the brass lock behind me. Night air hit my face. My hands were shaking. Not from dialysis. From something deeper. The feeling that comes after a long operation, when the patient is closed and the room is quiet, and the surgeon finally allows himself to be human again. I walked downhill toward the bus stop. My phone buzzed once. Nina. Received all 17. Grace authenticating metadata now. Ray. This is everything. I put the phone away. Rain had returned, tapping my shoulders like impatient fingers. Behind me, the house sat dark on its hill, holding secrets it did not know had already been copied and sent across an encrypted wire to a woman who would turn them into weapons. 6 days ago, I stood on that porch in the rain with a garbage bag and a broken photograph. Tonight, I walked away with 17 photographs that would break the people who broke me. The difference between a victim and a surgeon is one thing. Precision. Thursday morning, Nina called at 7:15. Her voice had the tight precision of a person who had not slept, but did not want you to know. Grace authenticated all 17 images. Metadata is clean. Timestamps match the device. Morrison reviewed everything last night. He is requesting a federal warrant for Garrett's financial records and a subpoena for Dr. Patel. But he needs one more thing. What? A direct statement from Vanessa or Garrett admitting the scheme. The emails are strong, but a defense attorney will argue they were taken out of context. Morrison wants something verbal, recorded, unambiguous. I sat on the edge of the hostel bed. The springs groaned beneath me. Outside the window, Pike Place was waking up. Fish vendors shouting, trucks reversing. The ordinary machinery of a city that did not know an old man was sitting in a $55 room planning the most important operation of his life. I can get it, I said. How? Vanessa calls Garrett every Thursday night at 9. She has done it for years. When she lived at home, it was her mother she called. After Margaret died, she switched to Garrett whenever they were apart. Thursday night at 9. It is her rhythm. She does not break rhythm. Where will she be? At the house. Garrett has a second poker night in Bellevue on Thursdays. He leaves at 7 and comes back after midnight. Vanessa stays home alone. Nina paused. I could hear her thinking through the legal architecture, the way I used to think through arterial pathways before a bypass. Every route examined. Every risk measured. If you are inside the house, and she does not know you are there, Washington is a two-party consent state. You cannot record her without permission. I know. But there is an exception. Washington RCW 9.73.030 allows recording without consent when the conversation contains evidence of a felony in progress. Elder financial abuse is a Class B felony. Wire fraud is federal. The guardianship petition based on a fabricated medical evaluation is fraud upon the court. Every word out of her mouth on that call will be evidence of ongoing criminal activity. Nina was silent for 3 seconds. You researched that. I spent 31 years reading medical law to protect my patients from malpractice claims. Reading criminal statutes is not that different. The language is just less Latin. She almost laughed. Almost. Where will you be when she makes the call? The dry sauna, I explained. When Margaret and I renovated the house in 2003, she insisted on a small dry sauna in the basement, next to the laundry room. Finnish style. Cedar walls. A glass door with a wooden handle. Margaret used it every evening after her garden work. She said the heat reminded her of her grandmother's bathhouse in Osaka. After Margaret died, nobody used it. Vanessa hated saunas. She called them pointless sweat boxes. There was no reason for her to open that door. The sauna sat 8 feet from the basement stairs. Sound traveled clearly through the floor joists. I had heard Margaret's phone conversations from the sauna 100 times while I waited for her to finish so we could eat dinner. Every word from the kitchen above came through the ceiling like a whisper through thin wood. I go in before 7 while they are still upstairs. I use the basement window again. I sit in the sauna, with the door closed and the light off. Garrett leaves at 7. Vanessa stays. At 9 she calls him. I record everything on my phone. The felony exception covers me. And if she comes downstairs, she will not. Vanessa has not done her own laundry since she was 19. The basement is storage to her. She does not go down there. Nina exhaled. This is dangerous, Ray. I operated on a man's heart for 11 hours once while his blood oxygen dropped to 60%. He coded twice on the table. I brought him back both times. Sitting in a dark sauna for 4 hours is not dangerous. It is patience. Thursday evening. 6:20. I entered through the basement window again. The brass latch opened without resistance this time. As if the house remembered me, I moved through the dark basement and opened the sauna door. The cedar smell hit me immediately, rich and warm and full of Margaret. I sat on the lower bench, the one she preferred because the heat was gentler there. I closed the door. I turned off my phone screen and set it to record audio. Then I waited. Above me, footsteps. Garrett's heavy stride crossed the kitchen at 6:45. The garage door opened and closed. The Audi engine started, then faded. One set of footsteps remained. Lighter, Vanessa's heels clicking on the hardwood like a metronome, counting down to something she could not see. She moved between the kitchen and the living room for 2 hours. I heard the television. I heard water running. I heard a wine glass set down on the granite counter, that specific bright clink Margaret's crystal made. She was using Margaret's wine glasses. Something about that detail burned hotter than anything else. At 8:57 the television went silent. At 9:01 I heard the FaceTime chime. Then, Vanessa's voice, clear as a surgical monitor, reading vitals. Hey babe, how was the game? Garrett's voice came through the speaker, tinny but audible. Down 300. These guys are idiots, but they are lucky idiots. What is happening with the house? Kevin called today. David Chen is confirmed. 2,250,000. Cash. He wants to close in 12 days. I told Kevin, we need the guardianship order first, so I can sign as trustee. What about the hearing? Next Tuesday. Dr. Patel filed the cognitive assessment yesterday. I read it. He wrote that Dad shows significant memory impairment, consistent with early dementia, secondary to renal toxicity. It is perfect. The judge will not even question it. And your father? Has he called? Vanessa laughed. The sound was short and dry. Nothing like Margaret's laugh. Nothing like warmth after winter. He is probably still in that motel or wherever he went. He has no money. No lawyer. No phone plan that lasts past next week. He is done, Garrett. He was done the minute I changed those locks. What about after we sell? We pay Pacific Rim the $700,000 from closing. That leaves us about $1.5 million after Kevin's commission and taxes. We transfer it to the Zurich account Thursday after closing and fly out Friday morning. First class. I already packed. What if he tries to fight it? With what? He is a 71-year-old man on dialysis with a garbage bag of clothes and no bank account. Who is going to believe him over his own daughter and a doctor's assessment? Nobody. He is invisible. I sat in the dark and listened to my daughter erase me from existence. With the casual confidence of someone ordering dinner. 4 minutes and 38 seconds. That is how long the call lasted. 4 minutes and 38 seconds of my daughter explaining to her husband exactly how they planned to steal my home, fake my incompetence, and disappear to Switzerland with the money. The call ended. Vanessa's footsteps moved upstairs. A door closed. The house went quiet. I stopped the recording. 4 minutes. 38 seconds of audio that contained admissions of title fraud, wire fraud, elder financial abuse, bribery of a medical professional, and conspiracy to flee jurisdiction. Every word clear, every word damning. I waited another 40 minutes until the house was completely still. Then I opened the sauna door, crossed the basement, climbed through the window, and disappeared into the hedge. The rain was falling again. I did not mind. The rain felt like Margaret's hand on my shoulder, steady and familiar, telling me what she always told me before I walked into the operating room. You have everything you need, Ray. Now finish it. I did not sleep Thursday night. I sat on the hostel bed with my phone on the mattress beside me and played the recording 7 times. Each time I heard something new. Not new words. The words did not change, but the weight of them shifted. The way a tumor looks different on the 3rd scan than it did on the 1st, because your eyes have learned where to focus. The first time I played it, I heard my daughter's voice, and my chest tightened like a fist was closing around my sternum. The second time, I heard the details. David Chen, 2,250,000. 12-day close. Zurich account. First-class tickets. The third time, I heard the confidence. She was not nervous. She was not whispering. She spoke the way someone speaks when they believe they are untouchable. The fourth time, I heard the contempt. He is invisible. She said that about me. Her father, the man who held her the night she was born, who drove 40 minutes to her school every Tuesday for 6 years because she wanted to play violin, and the only teacher Margaret approved of was in Tacoma. Invisible. The 5th time, I stopped hearing my daughter. I started hearing a defendant. At 6 in the morning, I called Nina. She answered on the first ring. She had not slept either. I have it, I said. 4 minutes. 38 seconds. Send it now. I sent the audio file through the encrypted channel she had set up on Signal. 3 minutes later, she called back. Ray. This is a confession. She names the buyer, the price, the timeline, the guardianship fraud, the bribed doctor, the Pacific Rim payoff, and the Zurich escape. Garrett confirms every point by asking follow-up questions. A first-year prosecutor could convict on this alone. What does Morrison say? I am calling him next. But I need to tell you something first. Her voice shifted. The lawyer tone softened into something closer to the 15-year-old girl who woke up after heart surgery and saw me standing at the foot of her bed. The debt purchase cleared yesterday afternoon. The trust now legally owns Garrett's entire $700,000 obligation to Pacific Rim. J. Park signed the assignment agreement and sent the original loan file. Grace has it. I closed my eyes. 6 days ago, I had $110 in a garbage bag. Now I owned the debt of the man who stole my house. The man who sat in my kitchen drinking champagne while movers carried my life out the front door. I owned him. There is more. Nina continued. The loan file includes something we did not expect. Garrett did not just borrow $700,000 for the Bellevue project. He also pledged collateral. A residential lease. The lease on the condominium he and Vanessa rent in Capitol Hill. The lease is in Garrett's name only. And under the loan terms, default on the Pacific Rim debt triggers automatic assignment of the lease to the creditor. Meaning what? Meaning the trust now controls their lease. If Garrett defaults, and he has already defaulted because the original payment deadline passed 3 weeks ago, the trust can terminate the lease and initiate eviction proceedings. You do not just own his debt, Ray. You own the roof over his head. The room was quiet. Pike Place was waking up outside. I heard Lan opening the Vietnamese restaurant downstairs. The scrape of chairs on tile, the hiss of a gas burner lighting. Ordinary sounds on an extraordinary morning. When is the guardianship hearing? I asked. Tuesday. 4 days from now. And the house closing with David Chen? Kevin Tan scheduled it for next Thursday at Columbia Center. 50th floor conference room. Vanessa, Garrett, Kevin, and David Chen will all be present. Vanessa plans to sign as successor trustee once the guardianship order is granted on Tuesday. Then we let the hearing happen. Nina paused. What do you mean? I mean, we do not block the hearing. We do not file a motion to dismiss. We do not alert Vanessa that we know anything. We let her walk into that courtroom on Tuesday and present Dr. Patel's fraudulent assessment. We let her believe she has won. We let the judge grant the guardianship if that is what the evidence leads to. And then on Thursday, we walk into that conference room on the 50th floor and we end it. Ray, if the guardianship is granted, she becomes your legal guardian. She gains control of your finances, your medical decisions, your trust, for 2 days. She has control for 2 days. And during those 2 days, she will do exactly what she told Garrett she would do. She will schedule the closing. She will prepare the wire transfer to Zurich. She will confirm the flight. And every single action she takes will be additional evidence of criminal intent, documented in real time by Agent Morrison's surveillance team. Nina was quiet for a long time. I could hear the harbor through her office window, the slow rhythm of water against wood. You want to give her enough rope to hang herself. I want to give her enough rope to hang herself, tie the knot, and step off the platform. By the time she sits down in that conference room on Thursday, she will have committed so many felonies that no defense attorney in the country can untangle them. Morrison will need to agree to this. He will agree. Because right now he has emails and a recording. If we wait until Thursday, he will have emails, a recording, a fraudulent court order, a bribed medical evaluation used as evidence in open court, a wire transfer to a Swiss account, and documented flight from jurisdiction. That is not a case, Nina. That is a career. She exhaled. I heard her pen tap the desk 3 times. Then she spoke, and her voice was steady again, the lawyer back in full control. I will call Morrison at 8. I will present the strategy. If he agrees, we let Tuesday happen and prepare for Thursday. I will need you in that conference room, Ray. Can you do that? I performed a 7-hour triple bypass on a 68-year-old woman while running a 102-degree fever because there was no other surgeon available. I sat in a dark sauna for 4 hours, listening to my daughter plan my erasure without making a sound. I can sit in a conference room. What will you wear? The question surprised me. Then I understood. Appearance matters. In surgery, the white coat tells the patient, you are in control before you say a word. In a courtroom, the suit does the same thing. I will figure that out, I said. Figure it out well. Thursday is the last operation, Ray. And everyone in that room needs to see the surgeon, not the patient. I hung up and looked at my reflection in the hostile bathroom mirror. The face, looking back, was thin. The cheekbones were sharper than they had been 6 months ago. The eyes were tired but clear. The hands, resting on the porcelain sink, were still steady. 4 days. 4 days until the 50th floor. 4 days until my daughter learned that invisible men can still cut. Tuesday came and went. Nina attended the guardianship hearing at King County Superior Court as an observer, sitting in the back row with a yellow legal pad and a face that revealed nothing. She called me afterward. It took 40 minutes. Vanessa's attorney presented Dr. Patel's cognitive assessment. The judge asked 2 questions. Vanessa cried on the stand. Real tears or rehearsed tears, I could not tell. The judge granted temporary guardianship effective immediately. Vanessa is now your legal guardian and successor trustee of the Raymond Ishida Irrevocable Trust. I was sitting in Land's restaurant when I received the call. The pho was getting cold. I watched the steam curl above the bowl and disappear. My daughter now controlled my medical decisions, my finances, and the trust Margaret built to protect me. On paper, I was no longer a free man. Morrison? I asked. He is in. Full surveillance authorized. His team is monitoring Vanessa's phone, Garrett's email, and Kevin Tan's office line. Everything she does between now and Thursday is being recorded by the federal government. Good. Ray. There is something else. Vanessa called Kevin Tan 11 minutes after the hearing ended. She confirmed the Thursday closing. $2,250,000. David Chen wired earnest money this morning. $100,000 into the escrow account at Chicago Title. The closing is scheduled for 2 in the afternoon at Columbia Center, 50th floor, Conference Room B. 2 in the afternoon. Thursday. 48 hours from now. One more thing, Nina said. Morrison's team intercepted an email from Vanessa to a private banker in Zurich named Lucas Brenn. She sent him the estimated net proceeds after commission, taxes, and the Pacific Rim payment, $1,480,000. She asked him to prepare a receiving account under both names, Garrett and Vanessa Holt. The wire is scheduled for Thursday evening, 6 hours after closing. They were moving exactly as Vanessa had described on the FaceTime call. Step 1. Guardianship. Done. Step 2. Sell the house. Thursday. Step 3. Pay Pacific Rim. They did not know Pacific Rim had already been paid. Step 4. Zurich. Thursday night. Every step a felony. Every step documented. I need a suit, I said. Nina paused. What? You told me Thursday is the last operation. Everyone in that room needs to see the surgeon. I need a suit. Ray, you have $52. I have less than that. I have $31.40, but I do not need money. I need Margaret's closet, I explained. Before Margaret died, she had ordered a custom Navy suit for my 70th birthday. She commissioned it from a tailor in Pioneer Square named Endo, a third-generation Japanese-American whose grandfather had been interned at the same camp as mine, Minidoka. Margaret told me about the suit 2 weeks before her stroke. She said it was hanging in the cedar closet in the guest room, wrapped in garment plastic, with a note pinned to the lapel. I never opened it. After she died, I could not bring myself to touch anything she had prepared for a future we would not share. The suit was still in that house. Guest room closet. Second floor. Unless Vanessa had thrown it away. I go in tonight, I said. One last time through the basement window. 5 minutes. In and out. Nina did not argue. She knew what the suit meant. It was not fabric. It was armor. It was Margaret standing beside me in that conference room, even though she had been dead for 2 years. Wednesday night. 6:45. Garrett's Audi left. Vanessa's BMW followed 8 minutes later. I entered through the hedge, through the panel, through the window. My knees complained less this time, as if my body had accepted the routine. I climbed to the second floor and opened the guest room door. The room was mostly untouched. Vanessa had no use for it. The cedar closet stood in the corner, the same closet Margaret had filled with linens and off-season coats and the quiet artifacts of a 40-year marriage. I opened it. The garment bag was there. Navy blue plastic with a brass zipper. I unzipped it, and the cedar smell rushed out, mixed with something else. Lavender. Margaret's lavender. She must have placed a sachet inside the bag before she sealed it. The scent hit me so hard I had to put my hand on the wall to keep standing. The suit was beautiful. Dark navy wool, single-breasted, 2 buttons. The stitching was precise, each line as clean as a suture. Endo had done extraordinary work. The fabric felt like authority. On the lapel, pinned with a small silver safety pin, was a note in Margaret's handwriting. 5 words on cream-colored cardstock. Show them who you are. I pressed the note against my chest and stood in that closet for a long time. The house was silent around me. The cedar breathed. The lavender held. And Margaret was there. Not as a ghost, not as a memory, but as a presence I could feel in the grain of the wood and the weight of the wool and the 5 words she had written knowing someday I would need them. I took the suit. I took the note. I closed the closet. went downstairs, through the basement, out the window, and into the night. Back at the hostel, I hung the suit on the bathroom door and stood in front of the mirror. I held the jacket against my chest. The man in the reflection looked different. Thinner. Yes. Older. But there was something in the eyes that had not been there 6 days ago. 6 days ago, those eyes belonged to a patient. Tonight, they belonged to a surgeon. I set my phone alarm for 6 in the morning. I placed Margaret's note on the nightstand next to the cracked photograph of her face. 2 artifacts from the same woman. One broken by Vanessa's carelessness, one preserved by Margaret's love. Tomorrow I would carry both into that conference room. I turned off the lamp and lay in the dark. My kidneys ached. The catheter pulled. My knees throbbed from 3 nights of climbing through basement windows. But my hands were flat on the mattress. Palms down. Fingers still. No tremor. Tomorrow at 2 in the afternoon, my daughter would sit in a conference room on the 50th floor of Columbia Center and believe she was about to collect $2,250,000 for a house she had stolen from her dying father. She would be wearing something expensive. Garrett would be checking his watch. Kevin Tan would have the closing documents spread across the table. David Chen would be ready to sign. And then the door would open. And I would walk in wearing the suit my dead wife made for me, carrying evidence that would dismantle every lie my daughter had constructed. Show them who you are. I intended to. Thursday. The day arrived not with rain but with sunlight. The first clear morning in Seattle in 11 days. I stood at the hostel window and watched the sky open above Elliott Bay like a wound finally healing. The water was silver. The mountains were white, and the city below me had no idea what was about to happen on the 50th floor of its tallest building. I showered carefully, working around the dialysis catheter the way I had done every morning for 14 months. The hot water stung the tape edges. I dried myself with the thin, hostile towel and stood in front of the mirror. The man looking back at me had lost 9 pounds in 7 days. The cheekbones were sharp. The collarbone was visible above the catheter line. But the eyes were steady and the jaw was set and the hands hanging at my sides did not shake. I put on the suit. The navy wool settled over my shoulders like a second skin. Endo had cut it perfectly, accounting for the slight drop in my left shoulder from 30 years of leaning over operating tables. The pants broke cleanly at the shoe. The jacket buttoned without pulling. Margaret had given Endo my measurements from the last suit she bought me 5 years earlier. And he had adjusted for age. The fabric smelled like cedar and lavender, and the faintest trace of Margaret's hand lotion, as if she had touched the wool before sealing the bag. I pinned her note inside the left breast pocket, directly over my heart. 5 words against my chest. Show them who you are. Then I picked up the cracked photograph of her face from the nightstand and slid it into the right pocket. 2 pockets. One holding her words, one holding her face. She was coming with me. I left the hostel at 12:30. Lan was standing outside her restaurant arranging flowers in a tin bucket. She looked up and saw me in the suit, and her eyes widened. She had only ever seen me in a wrinkled jacket and brown Oxfords. She said nothing. She just nodded once, slowly. The way you nod at someone walking into something important. I nodded back. I took the number 13 bus downtown. The ride was 17 minutes. I sat in the back and watched Seattle scroll past the window. The coffee shops and the construction cranes and the homeless man sleeping under the viaduct and the woman jogging with a stroller and the seagulls fighting over bread near the ferry terminal. An ordinary Thursday for everyone except me. Columbia Center rose 76 stories above 5th Avenue. All black glass and steel. The tallest building in Seattle. I had been here once before, 20 years ago, for a medical malpractice deposition on the 42nd floor. I won that case. The opposing attorney made the mistake of questioning my surgical technique in front of a jury that included a retired nurse. She looked at him the way a mother looks at a child who has lied, and that was the end of it. I entered the lobby at 1:25. The security guard glanced at my visitor badge and waved me through. The elevator was glass on one side, and as it climbed, I watched the city fall away beneath me. Puget Sound spread out to the west, dotted with ferries and container ships. Bainbridge Island sat green and quiet on the horizon. Nina was there right now, in her office above the harbor, waiting for my call. The elevator opened on the 50th floor. The hallway was carpeted in dark gray, the walls lined with abstract art that probably cost more than my hostel room cost for a year. Conference room B was at the end of the hall. The door was frosted glass with a brushed steel handle. Through the glass, I could see shapes moving inside, blurred figures around a long table. The closing had not started yet. I checked my phone. 1:47. 13 minutes early. I sat in a leather chair in the hallway and waited. My hands rested on my knees. My breathing was even. 4 beats in, 4 beats out. The same pattern I used before every surgery. Calm the body first. The mind follows. At 1:55, a man in a charcoal suit walked past me and entered conference room B. Kevin Tan. I recognized him from the email chain. Slim build, early 40s, expensive haircut, leather portfolio under his arm. He moved with the quick confidence of a man who closes deals and collects commissions and sleeps well at night. At 1:58, a second man arrived. Younger, mid-30s, wearing a navy quarter zip and khaki pants. David Chen, the tech executive from San Francisco who was about to pay $2,250,000 cash for a house that did not belong to the woman selling it. He carried a single folder and a coffee cup from the lobby cafe. He looked relaxed. He had no idea he was walking into a crime scene. At 2:01, the elevator opened again. Vanessa stepped out first. She wore a black-fitted dress, pearl earrings, and black heels that clicked on the hallway tile with the same rhythm I had heard through the sauna ceiling. Her hair was pulled back. Her makeup was precise. She looked like a woman in complete control of her life. Garrett followed half a step behind. Navy blazer, white shirt, the Omega Seamaster glinting on his left wrist. He was scanning the hallway, the way a man scans a room when he owes people money. His eyes passed over me without stopping. He did not recognize me. I was sitting 10 feet away in a suit his dead mother-in-law had bought for me, and he looked right through me the way you look through furniture. They entered conference room B. The frosted glass door closed behind them. Through it, I could see them take seats at the far end of the table. Kevin Tan spread documents across the surface. David Chen opened his folder. Vanessa smiled and shook hands. Garrett adjusted his watch. I stood up. I buttoned the top button of my jacket. I felt Margaret's note press against my chest and her photograph press against my ribs and the weight of 7 days of evidence in my phone and the weight of 71 years of life in my bones. My phone buzzed. Nina. One word. Now. I walked to the frosted glass door. I placed my hand on the brushed steel handle. It was cold. Everything on the other side of this door was about to change. Every lie was about to collapse. Every stolen dollar was about to be accounted for. Every person sitting at that table was about to learn that the invisible old man with cancer and a garbage bag had been watching them, recording them, buying their debts, and building a case so precise that no lawyer, no judge, no banker in Zurich could undo it. I pushed the door open. The room went silent. "Dad?" I did not answer. I walked to the empty chair at the head of the table, pulled it back, and sat down. The leather was cold. The table was polished mahogany, long enough for 12 people but holding only 6. Closing documents were spread across the surface in neat stacks. I could see the property address printed on the top page. 4417, West Highland Drive, Seattle, Washington. My home, Margaret's home. Kevin Tan spoke first. He was trained to manage rooms. "Sir, this is a private closing. If you are not a party to this transaction, I need to ask you to leave. My name is Dr. Raymond Ishida. I built the house you are trying to sell. I lived in it for 30 years. My wife died in the upstairs bedroom, and I am very much a party to this transaction. Kevin looked at Vanessa. Vanessa's jaw tightened. She recovered fast. 30 years of watching her had taught me that much. She could shift expressions the way a chameleon shifts color, adapting to whatever room she occupied. Dad, you should not be here. You are not well. The court appointed me as your guardian because you cannot make decisions for yourself right now. She turned to Kevin. I apologize. My father has stage 2 kidney cancer and mild cognitive impairment. He is confused. I am not confused. And I am not here to argue. I reached into the inside pocket of my jacket, the left side, past Margaret's note, and pulled out a single folded document. I unfolded it and placed it flat on the mahogany table so everyone could see it. This is a certified copy of the Raymond Ishida Irrevocable Trust, filed with the Washington Secretary of State 4 years ago. The trust is the legal owner of the property at 4417 West Highland Drive. Not me. Not Vanessa. The trust. I am the sole trustee. Vanessa is listed as a contingent beneficiary, which means she inherits nothing until I die and the trustee approves distribution. Kevin Tan picked up the document. His eyes moved fast. He was a broker. He understood title. Within 10 seconds, his face changed. The professional confidence cracked, and something colder took its place. He looked at Vanessa. You told me the property was in your name through joint tenancy. It is. I filed a quit-claim deed 3 months ago transferring joint ownership. A quit-claim deed cannot transfer property out of an irrevocable trust, I said. The house entered the trust before the deed was filed. The deed is void. It has been void since the day it was forged. Forged? David Chen set his coffee down. He had been silent until now. The careful silence of a man who made his money by listening before speaking. What do you mean forged? I pulled out my phone and opened the photograph of the quit-claim deed from Garrett's laptop. I placed the phone on the table and zoomed in on the signature line. This is my name on the deed, but it is not my signature. My R is sharp. This R is rounded. My I carries an upward flourish. This one does not. And I always underline my full name. There is no underline. I have signed my name the same way since 1974. This signature was written by someone who studied my handwriting but did not know the details. David Chen leaned forward. He looked at the phone, then at Vanessa, then back at the phone. Then he closed his folder. I am not purchasing this property, he said quietly. Kevin Tan put both hands flat on the table. Vanessa, if this trust document is authentic, you do not have title to sell. And if the deed is forged, this entire closing is based on fraudulent instruments. I cannot proceed. Vanessa's composure broke for the first time. Not dramatically. Not with tears. It broke the way a hairline fracture breaks, invisible to anyone who is not looking for it. A small twitch at the corner of her mouth. A slight tremor in her left hand. I saw it because I had spent 40 years reading bodies for signs of failure. This is ridiculous, she said. He is sick. He does not know what he is saying. The court already determined that he lacks the capacity to manage his own affairs. Any document he presents is unreliable. The trust was filed 4 years ago, I said. 2 years before the guardianship petition. 2 years before Dr. Patel signed a cognitive assessment that you paid $5,000 for. The room became very still. Kevin Tan slowly removed his hands from the table. David Chen pushed his chair back 6 inches. Garrett had not spoken a single word since I entered. He sat frozen, his right hand gripping the Omega Seamaster on his left wrist as if it were a life preserver. I also have this. I opened the audio file on my phone. A recording made last Thursday evening. 4 minutes and 38 seconds. Washington state law permits recording without consent when the conversation contains evidence of an ongoing felony. I pressed play. Vanessa's voice filled the conference room, clear and precise through the phone speaker. Kevin called today. David Chen is confirmed. 2,250,000. Cash. He wants to close in 12 days. Garrett's voice answered. What about the hearing? Dr. Patel filed the cognitive assessment yesterday. He wrote that Dad shows significant memory impairment consistent with early dementia secondary to renal toxicity. It is perfect. The judge will not even question it. I watched Vanessa listen to her own voice. Describe the plan to steal my house. Bribe a doctor. Defraud a court. And flee to Zurich. Her face did not move. But her hands were shaking now, both of them, and she gripped the edge of the table the way a patient grips the bed rail when the anesthesia starts to fail, and they realize they can feel everything. The recording continued. We pay Pacific Rim the $700,000 from closing. That leaves us about $1.5 million. We transfer it to the Zurich account Thursday, after closing, and fly out Friday morning. Garrett's voice. What if he tries to fight it? Vanessa's voice. With what? He is a 71-year-old man on dialysis, with a garbage bag of clothes and no bank account. Who is going to believe him? He is invisible. I stopped the recording. The silence that followed was the heaviest silence I had ever experienced. Heavier than the silence after a patient flatlines. Heavier than the silence in Margaret's hospital room after the machines were turned off. David Chen stood up. I am withdrawing my offer and leaving. I want no involvement in this. He picked up his folder and walked out without looking back. The frosted glass door closed behind him with a soft click. Kevin Tan gathered his documents into his portfolio. His hands were shaking slightly. This closing is terminated. Vanessa, do not contact my office again. He followed David Chen out. 4 people remained. Vanessa, Garrett, me, and the truth, sitting on the table between us, like an open wound. Vanessa spoke first. Her voice was low and controlled. The voice of a woman who had been cornered, but had not yet accepted it. You recorded me illegally. That will never hold in court. Washington is a 2-party consent state. You had no right. Washington RCW 9.73.030. The felony exception. When a conversation contains evidence of ongoing criminal activity, 1-party consent is sufficient. Elder financial abuse is a Class B felony. Wire fraud is federal. Bribery of a medical professional to fabricate a court document is fraud upon the court. Every sentence in that recording qualifies. She blinked. Once. Twice. Then she turned to Garrett. He was still gripping the omega on his wrist. His face had gone the color of wet cement. Garrett, say something. He did not say something. He said nothing. In 31 years of surgery, I learned that there are 2 types of people in a crisis. Those who fight and those who freeze. Garrett was a freezer. He had always been a freezer. He froze when the Bellevue project collapsed. He froze when Pacific Rim demanded payment. And he was freezing now, in a leather chair on the 50th floor, while his entire life unraveled around him. I reached into my jacket pocket, the right side, past Margaret's cracked photograph, and pulled out a second document. I unfolded it and placed it on the table next to the trust. This is a certified assignment of debt. 3 days ago, the Margaret Ishida Irrevocable Trust purchased Garrett Holt's full financial obligation to Pacific Rim Holdings. $700,000. The trust paid $560,000 to J. Park for the complete assignment, including all original loan documents, the personal guarantee, and all collateral pledges. Garrett's hand released the watch. His eyes moved to the document. I watched his pupils dilate the way a patient's pupils dilate when the brain registers something the body is not ready to accept. You bought my debt? The trust bought your debt. Every dollar you owed to Pacific Rim, you now owe to the trust. And I am the sole trustee, which means, in the simplest terms you can understand, you owe me $700,000. Vanessa stood up. The chair rolled backward and hit the window. 50 stories of Seattle sunlight poured through the glass behind her, turning her silhouette dark and featureless, a shadow of the daughter I had raised. You cannot do this. You are under guardianship. The court declared you incompetent. Any financial transaction you conducted after Tuesday is invalid. The debt was purchased on Monday, one day before the guardianship hearing. The trust authorization was signed last Friday. Every transaction was executed while I had full legal capacity, verified by my attorney, Nina Alvarez, Washington State Bar Number 44712, and witnessed by a notary public in Winslow. Your guardianship order changes nothing that happened before it was granted. Vanessa's mouth opened. No words came. For the first time in my life, my daughter had nothing to say. There is one more thing, I said. I pulled out the third and final document. The loan file from Pacific Rim included a collateral pledge. When Garrett borrowed the $700,000, he pledged the lease on your Capitol Hill condominium as security. The lease is in Garrett's name. Under the original loan terms, default on the debt triggers automatic assignment of the lease to the creditor. Garrett defaulted 3 weeks ago when he missed the final payment deadline. The trust has already filed a notice of lease assignment with your landlord. I let the words settle. I wanted them to land the way a diagnosis lands, heavy and precise and impossible to argue with. Your lease now belongs to the trust. The trust can terminate it with 30 days' notice, which means the home you are living in, the condominium you furnished with my stolen money, the place you go to sleep every night, belongs to me. The same way my home belonged to me before you changed the locks and threw my clothes in a garbage bag. Garrett put his head in his hands. His shoulders moved. He might have been breathing. He might have been crying. I did not care which. Vanessa's voice came out in a whisper. Dad, please. I looked at her. My daughter, 40 years old, pearl earrings, black dress, standing against a wall of glass with 50 stories of empty air behind her. She looked exactly like Margaret in that moment. The same jawline, the same dark eyes, the same way her hands hung at her sides when she did not know what to do. And for 1 second, one fraction of a heartbeat, the father in me wanted to stop. The father in me wanted to say it was enough, that she had learned, that we could go home and sit in the kitchen and drink tea and pretend none of this had happened. But Margaret's note was pressed against my chest. Show them who you are. And the cracked photograph was in my right pocket. And $520,000 of my retirement was gone. And a doctor had been bribed to call me insane. And a sticky note on my own front door had told me to die in a nursing home. You asked me what I would fight with, I said. You told Garrett I was invisible. A 71-year-old man on dialysis with a garbage bag and no bank account. You were right about the dialysis. You were right about the garbage bag. But you were wrong about invisible. The conference room door opened behind me. I did not turn around. I did not need to. I knew who it was because Nina had told me the exact time, and Nina was never late. 2 men in dark suits entered the room. The first was tall with gray hair and a badge clipped to his belt. The second was younger, carrying a manila folder. They walked past me without acknowledgement and stopped at the end of the table where Vanessa and Garrett stood. Vanessa Ishida Holt. Garrett James Holt. I am Special Agent Morrison, FBI, Financial Crimes Division. You are both under arrest for wire fraud, title fraud, elder financial abuse, conspiracy to commit fraud upon the court, and bribery of a licensed medical professional. You have the right to remain silent. Garrett did not resist. He stood and placed his hands behind his back as if he had been expecting this his entire life. The younger agent cuffed him and guided him toward the door. The Omega Seamaster caught the sunlight one last time as his wrist crossed behind his back. Vanessa did not move. She stood against the glass and looked at me. Her eyes were wet, but her face was still. She did not cry. She did not scream. She looked at me the way a patient looks at a surgeon who has just told them the tumor is inoperable. Not with anger. Not with fear. with the quiet, hollow recognition that the body they trusted has betrayed them, and there is nothing left to do. Morrison placed his hand on her arm. She flinched, then she walked forward, past the mahogany table, past the closing documents that would never be signed, past the chair where I sat in the suit my dead wife had made for me. She stopped beside me. 1 second. Her perfume reached me. It was the same perfume Margaret wore. She had been wearing her mother's perfume this entire time, and I had not noticed until now. I am sorry, Dad. 3 words. Too late. But I heard them. They led her out. The frosted glass door closed. The conference room was empty except for me, and the sunlight and the documents on the table, and the silence that follows every operation when the last suture is tied, and the surgeon finally exhales. I exhaled. I sat in that conference room for 19 minutes after they took her away. I know, because I counted. Surgeons count. We count beats per minute, breaths per cycle, seconds between clamp and release. 19 minutes of silence in an empty room on the 50th floor, while the city below continued its ordinary Thursday. Nina found me there. She did not knock. She opened the frosted glass door and walked in carrying 2 paper cups of coffee from the lobby cafe. She set one in front of me and sat in the chair David Chen had occupied 2 hours earlier. She did not speak. She just sat with me the way Margaret used to sit with me after a patient died. Not filling the silence, but honoring it. I picked up the coffee. It was bitter and too hot, and it burned my tongue. It was the best thing I had tasted in 8 days. Morrison wants a full statement from you tomorrow morning, Nina said finally. His office. 9 o'clock. I will be there. What happens to them? Garrett will be processed at the Federal Detention Center in SeaTac tonight. His bail hearing is Monday. Given the flight risk to Zurich, Morrison is recommending no bail. Vanessa will be processed separately. Her attorney can request a bail hearing, but the guardianship fraud complicates things. She used a fraudulent court order as an instrument of the crime. Federal judges do not like that. I nodded. I did not ask anything else about Vanessa. Not yet. The wound was too fresh to examine. The days that followed moved the way post-operative recovery moves. Slowly, painfully, with small improvements that are invisible until you look back and realize you are no longer where you were. Friday morning I gave my statement to Morrison. 3 hours in a gray room with a recording device, and Nina beside me, and a pot of coffee that someone refilled twice. I told him everything from the beginning. The rain, the moving truck, the garbage bag, the hostel, the cafe, the forged signature, the ferry to Bainbridge, the trust, the Singapore account, the debt purchase, the basement window, the laptop, the sauna, the recording, the conference room. Every detail. In order, the way I would present a surgical case at a morbidity and mortality conference. No emotion. Just facts. Facts are enough when the truth is on your side. The following Tuesday, the guardianship order was vacated. Judge Patricia Owens reviewed the fraudulent cognitive assessment, the arrest records, and Nina's motion to dismiss. She struck the order in 11 minutes and issued a formal apology from the bench. She said, "Dr. Ishida, this court failed you, and I take personal responsibility for that failure." I thanked her. I meant it. She was not the enemy. She had been given false evidence by people she trusted. That is how fraud works. It does not attack the system from the outside. It wears the system's clothes and walks through the front door. The criminal case moved quickly by federal standards. Morrison's team had more evidence than they needed. The 17 photographs from Garrett's laptop, the 4-minute, 38-second recording, the wire transfer records Grace Yoon traced, the forged quit-claim deed, the bribed cognitive assessment. Dr. Patel cooperated within 72 hours of his arrest, providing a full written statement that Vanessa had approached him at a medical conference in Bellevue and offered $5,000 cash for the fabricated evaluation. He said she told him it was a family matter. He said he needed the money for his daughter's college tuition. The judge did not care why. 3 months after the arrests, Garrett pleaded guilty to wire fraud, title fraud, and elder financial abuse. His attorney negotiated. Morrison did not negotiate much. Garrett received 6 years in federal prison and was ordered to pay full restitution of $520,000 to the Raymond Ishida Irrevocable Trust. The Omega Seamaster was seized as a criminal asset. It sold at auction for $6,200. I did not attend the auction. Vanessa's case went to trial. She refused to plead guilty. Her attorney argued diminished responsibility, claiming Garrett had manipulated and coerced her. The jury deliberated for 4 hours. They found her guilty on all counts: wire fraud, title fraud, elder financial abuse, conspiracy, fraud upon the court. The judge sentenced her to 4 years in federal prison and 3 years supervised release. She was ordered to pay restitution of $120,000, the amount she had personally spent from my stolen accounts. Dr. Patel lost his medical license. The Washington State Medical Commission revoked it permanently. He received 18 months probation and 200 hours of community service. His daughter's tuition was not mentioned in the ruling. Kevin Tan was not charged. He cooperated fully and testified that Vanessa had presented the forged deed as authentic, and he had no reason to doubt a client who appeared to have proper title documentation. Morrison confirmed there was no evidence Kevin knew about the fraud. His reputation suffered anyway. The real estate community is small, and brokers talk. The house was returned to the trust within 30 days of the guardianship being vacated. I hired a locksmith to change every lock. I kept the smart keypad on the front door and reset the code. Not to 1953. That number belonged to Margaret, and I did not want it touched by what had happened. I chose a new code, 1942. The year my grandfather entered Minidoka. The year he learned that home is not a building. Home is the decision to survive. I moved back in on a Wednesday afternoon. The moving truck that had taken everything out 8 weeks earlier was replaced by a smaller truck that brought back what remained. Most of my furniture had been sold or donated by Vanessa. The surgical display case was gone. The 3-panel silk paintings were gone. Margaret's crystal wine glasses were gone. The house was mostly empty, but it was mine. I stood in the kitchen where Margaret and I had eaten 10,000 meals and looked out the window at the rhododendron hedge that needed trimming, and the view of Puget Sound that never changed, and the sky that was, for the second time in 2 months, perfectly clear. Nina called that evening. How does it feel? I thought about the question. How does it feel to stand in a house that was stolen from you and given back by the law and emptied of everything except the walls and the memories they hold? It feels like the first day after surgery, I said. Everything hurts. But you are alive. 9 months passed. Seattle does not announce its seasons the way other cities do. There is no dramatic snowfall, no sudden blossoms. The change is subtle. The rain shifts temperature. The light arrives 2 minutes earlier each week. The rhododendrons outside my window bloomed in late April without anyone telling them to. I trimmed the hedge myself, on my knees in wet earth. With Margaret's garden shears, I found behind a box of Christmas lights she had labeled in her careful handwriting. My health stabilized. The cancer remained stage 2. Dr. Simmons adjusted my dialysis to 3 sessions per week instead of 4. He said my numbers were improving. I told him I had been eating pho. He did not understand, but Lan would have. I visited Lan once a month. Not because I needed cheap soup, but because she fed me when I had nothing, and never asked why. I brought her rhododendron clippings the first time. She put them in the tin bucket outside her door. We never discussed the hostel or the garbage bag. Some debts are repaid with presents. Nina came every other Sunday for dinner. I cooked Margaret's recipes: miso salmon, cold soba, chicken katsu that never turned out as crisp as Margaret's, but Nina ate without complaint. We talked about her cases and her father's carpentry, and the boat he was building in Tacoma that would probably never touch water. She never charged me for a single hour. I never insulted her by offering. I used the remaining trust funds to establish the Margaret Kimiko Ishida Foundation. It provides two things: legal representation for elderly victims of financial abuse who cannot afford an attorney, with Nina as lead counsel, and a scholarship for Japanese-American students pursuing medicine or law. I named it the Minidoka Scholarship, after the camp where my grandfather learned that dignity cannot be taken. It can only be carried the way he carried a silk painting out of barbed wire in a flour sack. The first recipient was a 22-year-old woman from Tacoma, Hana Watanabe, third-year medical student. Her grandmother had been interned at Heart Mountain in Wyoming. When I handed her the check, she held it with both hands and said, "I will not waste this. Surgeons learn to read faces." Hers was telling the truth. On a Tuesday morning in November, I found a letter in my mailbox. White envelope. No return address. Federal prison postmark from Dublin, California. I knew who it was from before I opened it. I carried it to the kitchen table. Margaret's table. Oak and heavy. The one piece of furniture Vanessa had not sold because movers charge extra for things that weigh more than they are worth. I sat down and looked at the envelope for a long time. The handwriting was Vanessa's. Small, slanted left, the way Margaret slanted. She had written Dr. Raymond Ishida. She had not called me doctor since she was a child. I opened it. Dear Dad, I have written this letter 11 times. The first 10 I threw away because they were full of excuses, and you deserve better. I am not writing to ask for forgiveness. I do not have that right. I am writing because there are things I need to say even if saying them changes nothing. I knew what I was doing. Garrett owed money, and I was afraid. But fear does not erase choice. I chose to forge the deed. I chose to file the petition. I chose to call Dr. Patel. I chose to write that note on the door. Every step was mine. You raised me in a house full of love. Mom raised me in a house full of love. And I turned that house into a transaction. I turned you into an obstacle. I looked at the man who held me the night I was born and decided he was in my way. I think about the garbage bag every night in this cell. I put your clothes in a garbage bag. I put Mom's photograph in a garbage bag. I put your life on the porch in the rain and went back inside and drank champagne. I do not know who that woman is, but she is me, and I have to live with that. I am not asking you to visit. I am not asking you to write back. I am asking you to know that I understand what I did. Not what I was charged with. What I did to you, and to Mom's memory. I love you, Dad. I know those words are worth nothing now. But they are true. Your daughter, Vanessa. I read the letter 3 times. Then I folded it and placed it inside Margaret's leather notebook, next to the Singapore account number and beneath her note from the suit lapel. Show them who you are. The notebook now held 3 things: Margaret's instructions, the weapon that saved me, and my daughter's confession that she understood why it was necessary. I walked to the window. The rhododendrons were bare, stripped to dark green stalks that would survive winter and bloom again. Puget Sound was gray. A ferry crossed toward Bainbridge, small and white against the water. I pressed my hand against the glass. Cold. The house was quiet. Margaret was everywhere and nowhere. The way love works after death. It does not leave. It changes form. It becomes lavender in a cedar closet. 5 words on a note. A recipe for salmon that never tastes right because her hands are missing. I am 72 years old. I have cancer and a dialysis catheter and hands that tremble when the weather turns cold. I live alone in a house that was stolen and returned and emptied of everything except walls and memories and the view of water that never changes. And I am still here. If you are listening, and you are old and afraid, and someone you trusted has turned against you, I want you to know something. You are not invisible. You are not disposable. You are not the sum of what has been taken from you. You are the sum of what you refuse to surrender. Margaret taught me that. My grandfather taught me that. Now I am teaching you. Do not surrender.